So, the trial of former soldier Daniel Khalif, who's accused of passing sensitive information to Iranian intelligence, has been put off today, following his alleged escape from Wandsworth prison, of course. Now, when you hear about this story, you can't help but think of, like, a 1980s novella and a film, The Shawshank Redemption, can you? Except it's 2023 and we live in one of the most surveilled countries in the world. So, is surveillance failing? Paul, let me come to you. I don't want to live in a country that has a camera on every single corner. I don't want my face routinely scanned when I am not breaking the law. And yet there are people, especially off the back of this really high-profile case, calling to make that the norm in this country. Where do you sit on it?
I'm, with you on that in terms of being very reluctant to want to see that sort of society creeping in. But on the other hand, Bev, we do have thousands of criminals and would-be criminals who are taking advantage of the fact that our police force are no longer properly policing the streets, that our prisons are full and they probably won't go to prison, that the whole justice system, frankly, is creaking under the pressure and falling apart. And it seems to me, particularly with the shoplifting epidemic, that people out there are taking advantage of this situation more and more. And if cameras, more of them, can be effective in terms of bringing people to justice, leading to arrests, stopping crime from happening, giving victims of crime justice, then I'm inclined to say, actually, on balance, we should probably go with it. I guess the question is, would we actually have the resources if we do have lots more cameras and, we hit upon lots more criminals engaged in their criminal activities? Will we have the resources? Will the police charge, or the CPS charge these people? Will they actually get before the courts at all? Will they then ever go to prison when the prisons are full? The chances are probably not, so it may be an academic debate.
The idea that it would lead to some sort of crime-free utopia that we'd all be able to walk freely around the streets is we can sort of see in China, where they have huge amounts of facial recognition. It's anything but a utopia. They might have very little crime, but they also have very little freedom.
They have little crime.
But they have very little freedom.
And that's the balance, isn't it?
Well, let's have a look at the figures about it. So Met and South Wales, the Met and the South Wales Police facial recognition in 2016 to 2023 was over 89% inaccurate for finding the person. 89%. 3,000 people in this country have been wrongly identified by police facial recognition. It's already banned in San Francisco and 13 other cities. It just isn't good enough, Martin, to justify this mass rollout.
Well, we already live in a city with cameras on every street corner. It's called London, thanks to Sadiq Khan's ULEZ scheme. And why can't one of his cameras nick terrorists? Then people might actually like them. Isn't it amazing?
You found a way of crowbarring that in, didn't you?
Well, but the point is, you can't even drive around the block in a diesel van without getting nicked, but Daniel Khalif can wander around London for 4 days. That's my point. And I've been writing about surveillance schools since I first qualified as a journalist in 1995. Always been against being watched by Big Brother. But I think society's changed for the worse. And it gets back to the sort of people we don't even know who are in the country. Who are the people that are entering illegally via dinghies? We know there are at least 19 terrorists confirmed. That's what we know about.
But they will cover their faces.
But
that's the thing. I think if you want to insist on surveillance cameras on every corner of our street surveilling our faces, we also insist that you cannot cover up your face. And we have normalised mask wearing. That's why shoplifting's gone off the scale.
Precisely, and where I come from Peckham to work, it's routine now for young lads to wear facial coverings. It's become part of their garb, part of their get-up. And in actual fact, those sort of lads were some of the very early adopters of face masks in the pandemic. They weren't concerned about the virus.
No,
it was a way of disguising themselves. It became trendy, became fashionable, and it's an offence, say, for example, to wear an IRA balaclava. But you watch the protest tomorrow, there'll be Hamas scarves pulled around faces all over the streets of London. What's going to happen then? Why are they covering their faces if they're so pro-Palestine? Why are these people going to be wrapping their faces up? Because they know they don't want to get nicked by facial recognition technology. That is why I think this debate's moved on.
But you see, I don't want to have to change. I don't want to have to be scanned walking down every street corner. I mean, you could just say, well, chill out, Bev. I used to be, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. And then I felt that the tentacles of the state during the last 3 years enter into my life in ways that I found absolutely unimaginable, and I craved being able to make decisions for myself. And so I find this absolutely shocking, because the wrong uns will always cover their face up anyway, Paul. It'll be the three of us not committing any crimes who will be on databases all around the world.
There's an argument then to say we should have an anti-mask law in this country, like they've got, by the way, in many European countries, including some of the what are regarded as quite enlightened European countries like Sweden and Denmark, for example. They've got it in France as well. There's an argument to say we should have that in public places, or certainly on public demonstrations. A friend of my family started university a few weeks ago. His third night outside his sort of halls of residence, he was approached by two youngsters wearing COVID masks, threatened to stab him, stole his phone, took all of his money. So it's always the balance. I've got a close friend who's in China at the moment and knows China quite well, an English person. And he doesn't deny that actually there's a very sort of high surveillance type of state there. That's unquestionable. But he said at the same time, most people are not bothered about it.
Yeah, but let me give you an example of China.
Because the crime is really low. When there's a serious crime, it's such a surprise to everyone. They're so shocked. So that's the balance.
You stand at the zebra crossing in China, there's no car coming for miles. But if there is not a green man, or whatever the Chinese equivalent is of the flashing green, and you cross that, then your face is surveilled and you'll get a ticket in your post and your social credit score will be affected. I don't want to live in that world, Martin.
No, but they also have a respect, or is it a fear, for law and order, because the Chinese don't mess about if you start breaking laws. And that's what I think the problem is in Britain. We have a complete disrespect and a breakdown of law and order. The point where people wearing masks, people parading around with their Hamas scarves, people parading around ripping down posts, they know they won't really get nicked. And I think this is part of a broader breakdown of that respect for law and order. And there's a feeling that the police take the knee to Black Lives Matter, they dance the Macarena, that the pronoun police, they're not putting the boot in when it's needed. And so therefore, if they need extra help, shouldn't be granted to them.
But you know what we're giving up? You know, we're just surrendering. We're just surrendering morality. We're just surrendering morality. We're going, just do what you want. You know what? You only behave well because you might get caught behaving badly. I want kids to be brought up to think, I'm going to behave well because it's the right thing to do, not because someone's going to have a picture of my face and
there has been, and it sounds a terribly right-wing thing for someone on the left like me to say it, but there has been, I agree with Martin, there's been a breakdown in what you might call that universal moral code that used to bind people in this country. And I don't accept the idea, peddled by lots of people on the left, some of them my colleagues, that there is this kind of inexorable path between poverty or hardship and committing crime.
No, I agree.
And I think that, the proof that that isn't right is if you go back to the 1930s, when there was real poverty and hardship and destitution in this country. You had, millions unemployed, you had hunger marches and things like that. And crime was still relatively low because there was that moral code. You didn't have an epidemic of people going into shops and robbing stuff.
That's where we have to somehow work out
It's not all about your economic status and your position.
You've been getting in touch at home. Very divisive, this, Andy. The more surveillance, the better. It prevents crime and terrorism. ID cards, too, if you've got nothing to hide. What's the problem? So much is the problem. We don't even have time to go into it today. And also, Paul saying we certainly need to embrace facial recognition. It'll be a valuable asset in identifying and tracking down terrorists. It won't. They'll just cover up their faces.